Are we ready to go? We're live? Okay, great. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Dan Rice, President of American University Kyiv. Very excited here to be here with AUK Talks and to introduce my good friend, Deb Cupp, President, Microsoft US. Deb is an amazing leader and an amazing speaker, and very excited for you to hear from her. She just has an amazing background and is doing wonderful things as the president of Microsoft, the largest company in the world. She runs a $67 billion enterprise in America. Deb and I met years ago at West Point. She brought her team up to West Point, and we had a fantastic leadership experience. And she's obsessed with leadership. She's a great leader herself and a great speaker about leadership. So I'm excited to introduce you to Deb. And so Deb is also a board member of Ralph Lauren, and she's sporting an amazing blouse right now. So Deb, so welcome to AUK Talks, and thank you so much for taking your time to come to speak with our team.
Dan, it's so fun to see you again. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm really happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much. Well, you know, there's so much we can talk about here. I mean, obviously, the global situation is very challenging, and here in Ukraine in particular. And the team has just done a wonderful job of opening the university during the middle of a war, and virtually, and now about to be in person. So, you know, we talk all the time at AUK about leadership, and I just love to hear, you know, your thoughts on leadership overall, because you're leading an amazing organization. And what are your leadership thoughts overall and your leadership philosophy?
Yeah, and you know, thank you. I think it's such an interesting topic, and I think for me, you know, leadership isn't a role. It's not a job. It's how people show up, and I think I've always been so drawn to the opportunity to guide and develop and learn from people, and you know, having a point of view and a perspective that supports them on their journey. So I think about it in the context of my role, or my experiences are to better those who I work with and who I work around, and who work for me, however you want to look at that. I think it's just the skills to say, I understand what the North Star is, so I understand where I'm headed. I understand where, in this case, my organization needs to go. And my job is to make sure that I make that incredibly clear for those who are both working for me, but also working around me. So to me, leadership is sort of a 360 of every aspect of the business that you collectively pull together and guide. And I think it's an amazing opportunity to find skills and strengths in others. It's an amazing opportunity to be curious and authentic. And it's an amazing opportunity just to experience what people are capable of. So to me, it's such an enriching, joyous experience where you have the opportunity to guide and lead, provide guardrails, drive accountability, but do all of that in a way that enriches people's experiences every single day. So it's a big, tall order. You know, if you do it in a way that you really believe will create better experiences for those around you while you're accomplishing your objective, which is first and primary, you know, what are the goals that you're setting after? And how do you go accomplish them? I think if you do that with just that embracing, energizing, specific and focused outcome approach, it can be incredibly powerful. So I think it's honestly a privilege. It's a privilege to be able to do it. And I think those that treat it that way come at it with a very different approach and experience than those that don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, you certainly have the energy all the time. I've never seen you with that energy, so I'm sure that comes through. You know, you lead Microsoft with a culture first mentality. Can you describe what that means to you and why people should focus on it?
Yeah, so I think we are very oriented around culture at Microsoft. It's actually one of the things that drew me to Microsoft. It's an amazing company, you know, it's amazing technologies, but I was so drawn to the way that we lead and the way that we represent ourselves, or at least we aspire to. And so for us, we think a lot about our mission and our vision, and we think a lot about empowerment. So one of the things that I've loved about the way we look at the world is, you know, our mission is to empower every organization and every person on the planet to achieve more. And it's big and it's broad, but it's real. So we think about how we go about our day with that in mind. So if what we're doing is empowering organizations and people on the planet, so it's inclusive. We think about everyone in every geography, in every area, if you think about the planet itself. So I think this empowerment concept is so important to us. So it guides what we do. So we think about it in the context of how do we do that and in what way? And I think it's really truly guides our work. And then I think the culture becomes sort of the how you do it. So it's not just the mission, it's the how. So it underpins our environment. We think about, from a leadership perspective, we talk a lot about things like model, coach, care. Those are some of our principles, generating energy, being super clear about outcomes and success, and making sure that people understand the why and what we're doing. So I think that piece of it has to show up in the work that you do every single day. So if you're aligned by the mission, you're clear about the culture, which is really the how, that becomes the mindset that we work with. So we talk a lot here too about growth mindset. So the idea of being, at least trying to be safe in the I don't know. So one of the things I love about our CEO Satya is that he will happily say he doesn't know or he's not sure. And I think that is such a sign of strength and confidence to be able to approach something and say, I'm not sure, or I don't know what the answer is, but I'm going to surround myself with the smartest people I can, those that are smarter and better than me, and we're going to figure it out. And I think that's the beauty of sort of how the culture permeates through the organization. So, and look, it's always work, right? So, there are always days when you say, is our culture showing up the way that we want it to? And are we holding ourselves accountable? And I think that's another piece that's really, really important to us. And it also shows up in even the way that we look at performance. So when we do performance reviews or check-ins with our people, we talk about concentric circles around impact. And are we providing impact ourselves, but are we providing impact that others are benefiting from the work that we do? And then are we benefiting from the work that they do? And that's down to the person. So we think about it from the context of it's always team. And I think that's one thing that has also really drawn me to this company is this concept of doing it together, doing it with a team. There's no I in this business. You can't do this alone. And I think that's incredibly powerful. So it's super deep. It's deep in the way we try to lead. I think it's deep in the way we show up. And it's also super simple. So the other thing that I really love about it is, the concept of model, coach, care as a leader couldn't be more simple. It doesn't actually need a lot of explanation. You model the behavior you want to see. You coach people to make sure that you help enrich their capability and their outcomes. And then you show that you care. And I don't think that showed up more than it has in the past couple of years with a lot of just confusion and angst in the world. I think that model, coach, care framework has been pretty incredible for us as we continue to lead in the best way that we can. And again, we're always growing, the idea of growth mindset, doing it in a way that we make sure that we're honest about where we have our own personal gaps and areas to grow as better people, as better employees, as better coworkers, and as better leaders.
That's a really great lead into how did you change throughout, say, COVID as a leader? Yeah. What changed you, and what observations did you have with the biggest pandemic we've ever had? And
yeah, I think for me, I always, and you've known me a long time, Dan. I hope I'm the same person I was when you met me before. I've always tried to show up authentically. I've always just sort of been me. And I think COVID was very freeing in that way. And so I think that just the experience of everybody moving to working in their homes and everybody seeing their dogs go by and, having to pause while their kids are running around, I think it just created this experience where people sort of went like, it's okay. It's okay that I have other things going on in my life. It's okay that I can joke about it. It's okay that perhaps, it wasn't a good hair day, whatever it might be. I think it just created a little more levity. And it sounds weird because I don't want to diminish how horrible the pandemic was in so many ways, but I always look for a silver lining in anything. And I think the silver lining was it just helped all of us sort of be even a little more real. So I think for me personally, I got back to having, getting a little more, trying to infuse more fun and trying, and I will often just make fun of myself. I think there's just that experience of saying, like, you don't have to be a certain thing to be a leader. You don't have to show up some people will, it's up to you. But I'm not a super buttoned up formal person. I never have been. But I think COVID even allowed me to be less of that, and if that makes sense. But it didn't change how focused I am on accountability, how focused I am on execution, and how focused I am on making sure we do the right thing. That was clear, I think, for everybody all the way through. But I think it just gave us a little room to breathe into who we really are and just kind of let that shine. And I think that space, allowing people to have open, honest conversations, being honest myself with people about areas where I was personally struggling, or areas that I felt like, this day ever going to end? Just being honest in some ways, just help other people say, well, she's okay. Like, she's okay saying it. I can be okay saying it. She's saying she's going to take a vacation and she's turning off her cell phone. I can do that too. And so I think it's that type of stuff. The thing about leadership, I think we all know, but you don't realize, people hear every word you say. They watch every single thing you do. And so when you are in any environment, they're going to walk away with something. And if you can just give them something that makes them feel more connected, makes them feel more confident, makes them feel more real, makes them eliminate fear. I'm a big believer of, like, you got to get fear out of the system. Fear is super dangerous. Like, it just creates behaviors you don't want. It doesn't allow people to be their best selves. So I think those type of things, for me, it just sort of accelerated the ability to do those things that I sort of innately do, but feeling really good about it. Like, just sort of kind of leaning into it and saying, this is who I am, and I'm going to do the best that I can to create space for people to be who they are.
That's fantastic. We've talked a little bit about Microsoft culture, but when you look at prior to this position as president of Microsoft US, you led worldwide enterprise, all the largest clients around the globe. So you led every country that Microsoft is in.
Yeah.
What have you learned about cultural differences, and how do you lead across cultures, especially in a dispersed environment like this, where you're leading multiple countries simultaneously?
Yeah. I think you have to be super aware of what are cultural norms, and being really clear about what carries across and what doesn't. And I think that's a piece that even, you can all tell I tend to speak quickly. If people will say I have even in the US, I have a very Northeast sort of way about me. So I think just being clear about what cultures will allow and what cultures want to see. And so, and I'm not saying you don't be authentic. I've always sort of felt, no matter where I was going in the world, I was still showing up as my authentic self, but I may have ratcheted back or forward depending on what market I'm in. So I think a lot about the language that I use. I think about the pace at which I move. And I think about just being respectful of environments. And you can even say, even in a very simple example, but running the US and then running North America, Canada is not the US. And, and it's very easy for people to start to just assimilate Canada. And that's not what I wanted to do. It was very clear to me that they have an incredible passion. They are a beautiful country, and we needed to respect that. We needed to make sure that they showed up separately and differently than the US did. And so I think those are little threads that are so deeply important, regardless of what area of the world that you're in. And I think people are very attuned to sort of how you behave in those environments, and that you're deeply respectful of the cultures that they represent. So I think what's super interesting, though, is even areas like Japan is a very different business environment. It's very difficult in some cases for people to actually share concerns and challenges and fears. And so you have to work really hard to be respectful of that culture, but also help that culture along. So finding ways to allow the space to learn in that culture, so that you can get to a result or an answer that will be of benefit to them without them feeling like they were exposed or put in a position that was uncomfortable. So I always think of it as everything is like a puzzle to me. Like, you're always thinking about kind of the puzzle pieces and how they fit together and how you manage it in the right way, so that you're never creating an experience where you offend somebody or you backtrack because you approached it in a way that was very American, as an example. Like you had to be very careful. And that applies to sort of, lots of cultures, that you're not approaching it specifically from the culture that you come from, but you're approaching it from the culture that you're in. And I think that takes time and energy. And I personally spent a lot of time before I was visiting countries with the country leaders and said, help me show up in the right way so that we can still accomplish what we need to, but we're doing it in a way that is representative with what that culture wants. So it's everything in leadership takes time. And I think my advice is don't shortcut it. There are things that you can shortcut and you think it's going to be okay. But if you don't take that extra step to learn, you will, in the end, it will create more harm than it will for good. I think it's always worth the homework. It's always worth the extra step up front to make sure that you're creating an outcome that is of value to everybody around you.
You mentioned learning, and it makes me wonder, like Microsoft has reinvented itself so many times over the years.
Yeah.
The greatest company in the world. How do you focus on creating a learning institution within such a large organization?
Yeah, and it's the fun thing is it's somewhat of a learning institution anyway. So I think generally people inside of Microsoft are pretty hungry to learn. So there's always this desire, and especially at the pace at which we innovate, there's always a desire for people to lean in and learn as fast as they can. So we actually, in my business, we've created learning days, like where we take a Friday a month that we ask everyone to clear their calendars of anything else. And that's the Friday that they spend their time learning. And we don't care what they do. So that learning is personal. So we, of course, have learning plans for people based on your role. You certainly have required training. We all, of course, have required compliance trainings and things of that nature, privacy, security, et cetera. But then what do you want to learn about? You might want to learn about a particular industry. You might want to learn about a particular technology. We are very vast at Microsoft in terms of the technologies that we support. So you could spend months, digging deep on many, many different types of technologies as well. You also might want to spend time on leadership development. You might want to spend time on coaching in resiliency. It could be anything. So we have huge catalogs of learnings that people can do online. We also, of course, encourage people to learn in groups. But that's what we do. But we're very particular about setting aside the time. And I will tell you, we have to keep reminding people, it's easy for things to creep in, myself included, easy for things to creep in on those free times. But we really ask people to try to hold them sacred, because we know that people are happy when they're learning. And we know that people feel that they're personally advancing when they're learning and they're bettering their own selves in their experiences. So that's something that we take pretty seriously. And we, of course, always ask for feedback. I'm a big believer in hearing from the folks every day as to what's working and what's not working, and what are areas that perhaps we would bring things to a broader community to create a learning experience as well. So we'll do it both from an individual standpoint, as well as some topics we'll broadcast across the business, where we'll set up very specific learnings based on new technologies or capabilities, as an example.
When you talk about broadcasting across the business, there's so many different platforms and so many different means of communication with social media and all kinds of different things. How do you as a leader communicate, and how do you keep like a drumbeat within your organization? Like what do you deliberately do? Do you have a schedule set up that you use certain mediums, and how do you think about that?
Yeah, I love that question, because that is a hard one. So we have, almost 10,000 people in my business. And so I worry about this a lot. This is one where I am constantly thinking about, what is every person, if I did a poll, does every person in the organization know this, or does everyone clear on our objectives and priorities? So I think about this one a lot. So we use Yammer, of course, internally. We use Teams internally. We have Teams channels set up as well as Yammer. I do personally, I have my own LT. So my leadership team meets every single week for a couple hours. So we stay deeply connected to make sure we know what's going on in the business, areas that, that we're covering, just both from a performance standpoint, as well as, what's happening with our customer base, our technology, et cetera. We do bi-weekly calls with our extended leadership team. So think of that as my directs and their directs. because I'm a big believer again that like whatever I'm communicating, I want to get out as far as I can, as deeply as I can. And then we also do a monthly call with the manager community. So anyone that's a manager in the entire organization will hop on a Teams call, and we'll do that every single month. And we run them just in terms of just making sure that we're covering off on important topics, that we have open space for them. So that's a big way that we think about how to communicate out. So a lot of those things are sort of communicating out. Then I think about the communication back. So the feedback loop. How do I keep a feedback loop to make sure that I have a pulse on what's going on in my business? And so we're set up in we call them operating units. So we'll have, about 13 operating units in the business. And so I do, we call them listening tours. I basically, whether it's virtual, can be a combination of virtual and in person. I just go around to each operating unit throughout the year. And I'm very particular about how we set up the visits. So it'll be always customer visits, which I adore spending time with customers. There's no better way to learn about yourself than asking a customer. And then internal. So I'll do internal roundtables, and I require one of them to be only individual contributors, no managers. They can pick the topics. It's open. Ask me anything goes. Like, we don't structure them. We don't schedule them. We do schedule them, but we give them the time and they decide what they want to talk about. And then they can choose another roundtable that would be usually with managers and individual contributors. And then I also do like a town hall with that operating unit. So that's sort of the set process that we follow. And some of you listening are probably like, wow, that's a lot. It is a lot. And so, but it's so important, because the piece that we care the most about is that we're consistent in our messaging. We're consistent in our culture. We're consistent in the way we show up for each other and for our customers. And I learn so much from those experiences talking to our people. That's actually how I solve problems. So, I joke that, my job is chief obstacle remover. My job is to remove obstacles for people so they can do their job. So I end up uncovering, and just look, things, you're in a big organization, things that over time sort of sound silly, procedures that you might have put in place or policies 4 years ago. Some of them are still there and you don't know it. And then you're kind of digging in and you're like, wait, what? Why are we doing that? And then you can say, no, we're not doing that anymore. So it's this beautiful opportunity for me to connect with people very closely and learn. So I'm a super curious person, and I want to learn. I also think as a leader, I don't know enough if I'm not connected in many ways across the business to lead effectively. And so I think that piece of it, selfishly for me, is incredibly helpful so that I can do more for them.
Fantastic. Well, we have students here that are both bachelor's and master's students right now. So, they're obviously going through a crisis here in Ukraine with the war, but they are nonetheless investing in themselves to educate themselves for the future, to become leaders of Ukraine. What advice would you have to these young leaders as they focus on their academic pursuits during the middle of a war?
Yeah, well, first of all, I can't say enough, because I think that's amazing. Like, I just hats off to everyone who's creating that level of time and energy and investment in an incredibly horrible and challenging situation. So I just have a ton of respect for people who are making that investment in themselves. And I think it's important that you invest in yourselves. And I think people might be torn as to where they should be spending their energy and their time. And I'm a firm believer that you are better for everybody else if you are bettering yourself. And I believe that deeply. I believe deeply that you have to create for yourself the opportunity to better your own situation so that you can help others. So my first advice would be, don't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty about making an investment in yourself. You should. And I think that's amazing. My second advice would be to just listen and learn. I think that we enter every scenario. It doesn't matter if you have no experience, 5 years experience, 10 years experience, with some of our own limited mindset. And so I would say, open your minds, learn from your peers. It's amazing what you will learn from people who are in similar situations and very, very different situations. So don't discount the people that are coming from very different situations. All of the situations have a nugget of learning in there that can be incredibly powerful. And I would also say, do what you love. So if there's an area that you fall in love with, if there's a subject matter that you get really excited by, enjoy it, spend more time in it, learn more there, feel good about the opportunity to learn and develop in spaces that create excitement and joy for you. I think it's an opportunity for you to set yourself up for opportunities that come in the future. And so be super open-minded, be open-minded to others' ideas, things you might have thought were areas you didn't have interest, you might surprise yourself. So give yourself that opportunity to learn and develop in areas you may not have thought were ones that were of interest to you.
Well, we're really excited that we're going to be opening a second campus in an area of Kyiv called Unit City. And I'm excited to see that Microsoft has taken the top floor of one of the facilities there. So we're excited to have you open an office by our second campus.
That's
What
awesome.
are your thoughts? Yeah, it's great. And so what are your thoughts on post-conflict Ukraine and opportunities? And how should people be thinking here about their own careers and what to focus on?
Well, I might be biased as I'm in technology, but I think there is just tremendous opportunity for people in the technology space. That doesn't mean you have to be a coder or an engineer. Of course, if you are a coder or an engineer, that's wonderful. But there are tremendous opportunities when you think just about cybersecurity. So in an area where, unfortunately in Ukraine, and Microsoft has been actually fairly involved in supporting fighting cyber attacks in Ukraine, that is an area that is exploding. And so we don't have enough individuals in the world that understand cybersecurity. So I'm a huge advocate of people being educated. That can either be from the standpoint of people who actually code, doesn't have to be. And I think that's what I want people to understand. You can think about cyber in the context of business management, IT management, security, privacy, things of those nature. That is always something worth learning about. So even if it's not the career you want, I would highly encourage people to get educated there. The technology space is kind of remarkable right now in terms of lots of areas of interest and knowledge. So I'm a big believer in, you don't have to be, and by the way, I'm not a deep technologist. I'm not a coder. I'm not an engineer, but I am deeply embedded in technology, and it's a business aspect. So I didn't go through, I was, I have an MBA in business. I have a marketing and finance undergrad degree from a business school, undergrad business school. So my upbringing and learning was all on the business side of work. And so I think the benefit of that is technology is an enabler. And I think even in our world, I think about it from the context of what problems am I solving for the customers that we serve? And I come at everything through that angle. So it's not technology for the sake of technology. It's a technology for the sake of solving business problems. So my belief is that field is enormous. The more people that have a point of view related to that, the better off we are. And I think the opportunities are really unlimited. So I think for me, those are areas that you will benefit from. Even you think about huge organizations like EY, Accenture, PwC. These organizations are massive, and they have consulting organizations as well as technology organizations. So there's all of these opportunities to go into amazing companies that are spearheaded off of technology in some way. So that's just one example. Of course, there might be those of you who want to be lawyers and other things as well, which is also deeply of value, to us and to every organization. So I think, again, I'm sort of a believer of, you got to do something you love. Like, that's what really creates energy, and that's where people blossom. You can see it. And even in our business, when you see a talent, but they're not in the right role, and you pick them up and you put them somewhere else and you just watch them blossom, it's because you put them in a space that they care about, that they love, that they're energized by. And I just have firm belief that the baseline capability is there. You can do anything you want.
Absolutely. We completely agree. We think the IT sector within Ukraine is going to grow tremendously. And we have a mutual partner. We have EPAM is one of our first investors, and just a great group that has supported us entirely. And we're launching an entire school based on EPAM. So they're a great supporter of ours. But as you look as the students here, we have all Ukrainian students. What are your thoughts about international students coming to the US, going back to Ukraine, as the globalization is affecting, obviously, everything you've run Microsoft worldwide?
Yes.
What do you think they should be thinking about in order to prepare themselves to be a global leader?
I think it's a great question. And I think it's, again, it comes to open mind, knowledge, and understanding. So I think we often have personnel inside of Microsoft that are moving all over the place, and we love that. So I think it's wonderful to have folks that can come in from other parts of the world. If they come into our headquarters in Seattle, Washington, or if they come into any part of the business, which we have tremendous number of folks in our business that are from all parts of the world. Finance is another great example, by the way, and I didn't mention one that earlier. I think there's unbelievable opportunity for those. We partner deeply with our finance teams as well. So I think that's another area that people should think about as it relates to work opportunity. But to your question, I think it's just a matter of understanding the why behind what you would want to go do. So let's say if you do choose to want to go to the US or Canada or the UK or wherever it might be, what's the experience that you want to get out of it? And I think you want to think about it both from the standpoint of the work experience as well as the personal experience. So that opportunity to experience a different culture, to live in an environment that's different than what you're used to, and that the opportunities that might bring. So I think bringing your own unique knowledge and experiences to that new environment, as well as learning and just engaging in that environment, can be incredibly powerful. So I think you just have to prepare yourself, just like anything else. It's just preparing yourself for an opportunity to open your mind, learn, and certainly spend time before you go, learning about that business and that environment, so you have context as to how it would apply and what type of work you could go do. Oftentimes, you might think about it from the experience of companies. So are there particular companies that you have interest in? And I'm a big believer, if you do, target them, go send notes out, spend time thinking about those different companies. And I'm sure, Dan, you all probably do a lot of work to support them as well in that regard. But that to me is also pretty powerful in terms of being specific around why you think you can support or help a certain company. And if you know people in that company, call them, ask them, do interviews with them, spend time learning about those experiences, so that when you do have a chance to interview, you have some context from somebody who might be already within those organizations.
That's great. Now, we've had a number of students ask us to ask questions about this next subject, and I'm sure you get it very frequently. But what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence, and how impactful is it going to be in the short, medium, and long term?
Yeah, it's a super question, and yes, it's obviously a very, very, very hot topic for us. This is an interesting one for us because we spend a lot of time about creating what we believe is responsible AI. And, for us at Microsoft, I've said to somebody the other day, someone asked me, are you scared about this? And I said, I would not want to be anywhere else but Microsoft as it relates to the work that we're doing on AI, because we're so focused on democratizing technology. The idea and the beauty of what's happening with generative AI is that it's in natural language, which means you don't need to know how to code. You don't need to be an expert at any particular system. You can literally ask a question and get an answer. And I think the power of that, being able to be accessed by the masses who don't need to understand deeply how technology works, that's democratizing technology. And that's creating opportunity for people that did not exist, flat out did not exist before. So we think about it in the context of, how do we help people achieve greater productivity? How do we help them grow in the work that they do? And interestingly enough, and we have some data on this, satisfaction in the work that they do. And so I'll just give you a very simple example. If any of you are using Microsoft 365, if you've been in PowerPoint or in Office or in Word, one very, very simple example. So if you've written a proposal or a paper, and you need to put that paper into a PowerPoint, in Copilot, which is how AI shows up in our Microsoft products, you literally just drop the paper into PowerPoint and it creates a PowerPoint in like 5 seconds. Done. So now it's called Copilot for a reason, because it will offer up to you, hey, based on that paper, this is the PowerPoint I created for you. You might say, awesome, I want it in blue. Changes to blue. You might say, some of the content I don't love, I'm going to go in and do some editing. So the idea is that it's taking out the tedious work, and it's giving you time to focus on the real collaborative work that is of value, the content work. And so it's this idea of creating this opportunity to focus on the strategic stuff versus kind of the tactical stuff. And that's really where we're seeing so much energy in this environment. And even for engineers and coders, Copilot in what we call GitHub, which some of you may be familiar with GitHub, that's where developers develop. They use it in GitHub. So they basically have natural language AI fixing bugs, doing things that isn't super exciting to them. Their employee stats up like 70% because they're spending time developing code on things that they care about. So we're excited about that potential. I think that we will see short-term opportunities for great productivity gain that will allow others to work on things that they want to go do. We have a really interesting survey out, and Dan, I can send it to you if you want to share it with your students. Just our most recent workforce trends, where leaders aren't trying to get rid of people. That's not actually what they're trying to do with AI. They're trying to make the people they have more productive in areas that generate business value. So they're trying to take out this sort of tactical work and they're trying to lean it towards strategic work, which I think is so cool. Like that's really what we hope for. So that's one example of sort of how I think we're going to see some things happening in short term. Long term, we're working with some academic medical centers that are doing research on things like cancer, pancreatic cancer, which if any of you know anything about is the prognosis is never very good. It's very hard to catch early. And they're finding ways, the machines can find ways to find early detection that humans can't. Wow. And so if there's ways for us to find early detection of disease, if there's ways for us to find ways to create more sustainable, safe access to crops, et cetera, it's kind of endless in terms of the opportunity. Now, you don't just turn a switch and turn it on, right? So I think there's some belief in the world that like, oh, flip a switch and I have AI now. You can have some aspect of that with ChatGPT, which I'm sure many of you have been playing with. But you need access to data. You need information. So I think longer term, as organizations set up access to information and have data in a place that we can access in a way that can create the models, I think the opportunity is pretty cool. Like there's just lots of focus area, even in society's greatest challenges. So if you think about vulnerable communities with climate change, think about that for a second. Like, what can we learn about climate change that can give us some forward-looking perspective that will help us even with things like endangered species or cleaning up the world's oceans? I mean, you could go on and on as the data is out there. It's just a matter of getting it in a place that we can access it in a way that we will be allowed to foresee things that we couldn't see before, and doing it in a way that, again, is natural language. And I think that's the difference between AI now. We've had AI for 20 years. The difference now is that it's in this natural language. You can ask questions naturally versus having to know how to code it. And I think that opens up the minds. Watching our customers right now, the minds, the creativity is just blooming as they think about the potential. It's amazing to watch and be a part of. Again, it will come down to what can we execute against. And again, you need to have infrastructure. You need to have a technology baseline. You need to have all those things to make this work. But I think the potential is pretty cool.
No, that's very interesting. A lot to think about there. And as you talk about opening the minds, I mean, we are a university and our goal is to open minds and to create future leaders for Ukraine. And so, you know, as you think about that, we have several of our faculty on here also. What do you think from an educational standpoint? Because you see all of the major universities, what do you think educators should be focused on with all of this artificial intelligence, globalization, technical changes? What should they focus on as leaders?
Yeah, you know, I think it'd be very cool for, I think there's two parts to that. So you have the part of how do you educate future leaders? So, you know, how can you create relationships with organizations that can help educate, you know, so certainly the opportunity to create an education so that people understand what's coming. And this is moving very, very fast. So I think the hard part about this is even in our own organization, you are clamoring to kind of keep up with what's coming and how are you ready to support your customers. So I think about it from the context of your world. How do you even create a class that then isn't outdated in a year?
Yeah.
So creating relationships, I think, with organizations can be very helpful in terms of just, Microsoft being upstairs in, one of the locations could be super interesting in terms of, hey, you want to come down and, have a chat with the class. I think
Absolutely.
inviting external parties in to have dialogues with students, I think is incredibly powerful. I also
Mhm.
think there's some cool opportunities to build some use cases if you're teaching those that are in the technology space. What are the types of things that could be created with this technology? I also highly, highly encourage ethics in AI. I mean, that's something we spend a ton of time on. Very important. So if we think about future leaders and the ethics around AI, it's a deeply important topic to us at Microsoft, and I hope to everyone in the world, as we think about this capability and what it could mean. So I think creating the space to have people learn, I think a lot of that might come with partnerships with companies and organizations to create access of information as well as learning potential and opportunities. So I think it's going to be an ongoing process to sort of figure out how do you capture mind share quickly and infuse it into the population. The neat thing about this, though, is there's more information about ChatGPT and AI generative capability, like sort of in the masses than any technology before, like ever. So I think that's really neat. And back to sort of this democratizing concept of how do we give access to more people? It's just this ability to consume as fast as you can and also do some myth busting. So there's definitely some some things out there that you would say like, it's not really how it works, or it's not exactly what it means. And I think that's always helpful too. But I would look for partnerships. I would look for opportunities to do some super cool case studies and mind share work with teams. I think that'd be amazing just to think about what would you do? How do you think about ethics in AI? What does that look like? How do you set it up in a way that can be managing? Like, how do you manage that? We have ethics councils inside of Microsoft specific to, we have them for everything, but specific to AI as well. What should an organization look like? If you were to go into that organization, what would you do? I think there's a lot of cool things that could happen there.
Very interesting. You started off talking about, you have to take the fear out of the system.
Yeah.
And then we eventually discussed AI. And
Mhm.
how do you take the fear out of the system that so many people are worried about being eliminated, job
Yeah.
lost, and disintermediated because AI is going to replace all jobs? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think it's look, some of it's just going to come with time. Everyone is different in terms of their reaction to change and potential challenging situations. And I think that some people immediately go to like, oh, this is awful, everyone's going to lose their jobs. Then others go to, this is amazing, like we're going to have this unbelievable productivity boost and it's going to be incredible and everyone's going to be so happy. The answer usually is somewhere in the middle, right? So it's never one extreme or the other. I personally think that this is a learning experience. You're not going to dive into this thing. Companies aren't going to be able to scale this capability at the kind of pace that I think people are expecting. They certainly will. They're playing with it. So I think right now there are absolutely organizations that are using AI every day and have been, by the way, for 20 years in terms of forecasting their business, in terms of making sure they understand their supply chain. We all learned that wasn't perfect, right? So I think there's experiences that people are going to have to go through to understand how this actually applies. And so my opinion is the first wave of this thing is going to be more about taking out some tasks that feel repetitive or tedious, that are going to allow people to be more informed because they can ask questions that they couldn't ask before, that will create a better outcome. So I actually think it's going to create more positive energy first. And I think that experience is going to take time. It's going to take time for organizations to kind of get their head around this. I think I heard someone say that they believe the short-term impact is going to be much smaller than people expect, and the longer-term impact probably greater than people expect. So I think we're years away from an experience where, everything is AI. There's a lot of work that has to go into making it actually happen. Sure. Can you spin up a POC, a proof of concept? Sure, you can. Of course you can. But can you actually put that into production, have an experience happen? That takes some time and energy, and we'll all be learning through it. I think that's the key. So I think my advice is be open to learning, don't just, a lot of people, and this is true of life, there are certain voices that you listen to all the time. Go listen to some other voices. Just try to educate as best as you can. Honestly, feel free to follow Microsoft. I think we do some pretty good work here. I'll send you the workforce trends document just to give you a flavor of how people are thinking about AI, as well as other workforce trends that are pretty interesting for people. I think that would be my advice, is just listen, learn, talk to people. Don't read something and take it as, the gospel of, yes, that's true. Just being, open to learning and listening, I think is going to be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we always say, at West Point, it's good to feel comfortable being uncomfortable, and to get used to that, and
that's right,
and you thrive in chaos that way.
That's right. That's right.
So, and this has gone by so quickly, Deb. I love talking to you. It's 6:50 right now. I want to be respectful of our time. We have about 10 minutes left. Oksana had some questions from students, and we'd like to bring Oksana on. So, Oksana, you there?
Yes, we have a few questions. Let me start from the question about the culture. The question is, in Ukraine, we talk a lot about the development of culture of accepting mistakes in technological companies. What is your approach to this concept, and what, as a company, you do to promote people who make, or not promote people who make mistakes?
Yeah, I love that question. I'm so glad it got asked, because this is hard for people, right? So I think that's a vulnerability. And I think people get very nervous to express a vulnerability. But I will say that everything seems to come from a mistake. So when you are, you're working on something, look, none of us know. We're not always 100% sure it's the right choice. We're just not. I mean, I think if anyone says they are, they're not being truthful. You do your best based on the information that you have, the data that you have available, the brains around you that can help you learn and provide guidance. I'm a huge believer of giving people a little shove when they have an idea that might not work, but it's a good one. And it's like, it's worth taking a shot. And there's been examples of this where we've been super successful. And one just happened recently where I have a leader in my business who had a really neat idea about a particular group of targeted customers and the way she wanted to focus on it. And I said, do it, just go do it. Like, let's see what happens. Like, worst case scenario, it was a low risk proposition. It was really something that we said, we're not doing super great right now. So like, let's go try something new. And it's been a blooming success and is going to be rolled out worldwide. We have other examples where we did the exact same thing and it didn't work at all. But I'm a big believer of saying that person had an idea. They thought about it deeply enough to come forward with a proposal, which, by the way, most people don't. Most people will, not most, some people will complain about something, but they don't actually have an answer or a solution or a proposal. So the people who even take it to the step of, I thought about it deeply enough to have a proposal. I'm willing to present that proposal to you. That's even a big one. I reward that. I really think about, this is the example I want people to see, and I will share it with everybody. So I'll say, here's an example of this person who came forward. This is what they put together. Hey, person, why don't you share with your peer group what you went through in that experience? What did you learn? How did that change what you're doing going forward? So I try to celebrate that as much as I possibly can. Now, to be clear, if I see something someone wants to do that I feel very confident will fail, I'm not necessarily going to tell them to go do it. Like, I want to coach them and I want to give them guidance, but I also want to give them an awesome chance for success. So part of my job is to help steer them in a way that will give them that best possibility, but they don't always work. And I think that's okay. Like, we've tried 100 things that don't work every year. And it's like, that's okay. Like that, and you do it in a place that you can manage and that you can measure. I think that's super important. And then if it does work, what a cool thing. So cool thing, even if it doesn't, because you took the risk and you put yourself out there. And I think that says a lot about somebody's character.
Thank you. We have two more questions. The first one about AI, but I think you already replied, but I will read that question. Will AI take over jobs from MS employees eventually? And what do you do to control AI? This is like one combined question. And another question is again about the culture. What do you do in the company to cascade the values and to make sure that all employees, all your managers really believe in the values and practice them?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll take the second one because I think I kind of answered the A one already. And if you all feel like I need to come back to that one, I will. I think great question on the culture because it has to show up all the time. You have to continue to talk about it. You can't just launch it and then hope that, something great happens. So I'll give you a very specific example. So we have culture as part of our performance evaluation. So we've created these 3 concentric circles that are very specific to culture in action. So it's about impact associated with the way we expect people to show up. So that's you're delivering on your own. You are delivering off of the help of others. So you're taking their ideas and using them to inform what you go do. And then the opposite, you are giving to others ideas and thoughts that are creating impact for them. That is such a cool way to measure that culture is actually showing up, that the work that you're pushing is actually happening. And if you don't do that, if you don't thread it all the way up and down the organization, it's going to break somewhere because people aren't going to think you're serious. They aren't going to think that you really care about it. You're just talking about it. So you have to make sure that it shows up in the way that people behave. Another example is we created just kind of this 4 pillars in our business to represent how we want the culture to show up. And we actually give out awards based on it. So they're not performance based. They're culture based. So we of course have performance based awards, but every quarter we give out awards based on people showing up in the way that we want them to, representing the culture that we believe in. And so that cultural 4 pillars not only gets shown in every meeting and we start with it, it's also we award people. We actually represent the work that they do and that we highlight it with the entire organization. So it's an award that everybody in the organization gets to see, which is really, really cool. And then we also ask our leaders that, one of the things we talk about is have each other's back. So make sure that if someone is stepping into something that's hard, that you have their back. And so we will represent that even on a Teams call, where, as an example, somebody might be stepping into a discussion that's really uncomfortable, but it needed to be said. It's my job, if I'm on that call, to make sure that I'm reinforcing that person, that I have their back, that I show up and say thank you for stepping in and, bringing forward a tough topic. Let's talk about it. So I think every day there are ways to make sure that you're continuing to reinforce culture. And it's not easy. Like, it's something that you have to put a ton of energy into. And you really have to be specific about the expectations for everybody in the organization to make sure that it actually really shows up the way that you want it to. And it won't always, by the way. So you will always find examples where you just go like, is that happening still? But yeah, when there's 10,000 people in the organization, everyone, for the most part, has the best intent. I also say, come at it assuming everybody has the best intent. They might have had a bad day. You don't know what's going on at home for them. You all have had experiences that nobody could even fathom. So trying to come to a discussion or a class or an experience, knowing that the person who might be showing up in a way you don't like might have nothing to do with what's going on right then. It might have to do with what went on before they showed up. And so I continue also to coach people not to react when they see a bad culture, but instead embrace that person and talk to them. And I've done this where I see somebody on a call or in a discussion that just isn't behaving the way that I would hope for. I will call them afterwards and say, you okay? I won't yell at them. My first question is always, are you okay? And most of the times they're not. Like, they are pretty surprised about the question. And then you'll learn a lot about what's really going on. So I think, to me, culture is everything. You can probably tell. I think it is the heartbeat of your organization, of your class, of your experience. And we're all a part of that, every single one of us. So it's not a job of just the leader. It's a job of every single person in the business to make sure that the culture shows up the way you want.
Well, that's incredibly well put. And obviously You're speaking from the heart yourself, and we all appreciate our students here at American University Kyiv and the faculty. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Deb. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the team?
No, just a huge thank you. Dan, it's so good to see you, and I really appreciate the invite, and hopefully this was of value to everybody. It's an awesome topic, and I really appreciate the chance to share with everybody.
Well, it's been an honor, and the whole team is really appreciative. So thanks for all you do. Thanks for who you are and what you do.
Thank you. Take care, everybody. Good luck. Bye.